This is BBC Two. Steven Spielberg has a breathtaking reputation for success. His films have captivated audiences worldwide. So what is he like, this movie man? Find out face to face.
Steven Spielberg, you're the maker of Jaws, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, E.T., Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, the great popular escapist fantasies of our time, and also of other movies that deal in grimmer realities, The Color Purple, Empire of the Sun, and now Schindler's List. Are there two Steven Spielberg's movie makers?
There well might be. But I think what there is I think that there's really, one of me who commits my ideas to film, which are fun-loving and, entertaining. And then there's, I think, another side of me that is someone who actually has a life outside of the cinema. And very rarely do I let that part of me spill into my work. I've always sort of separated the two. And every once in a while, some of what I feel about in my real life kind of drips over to the other side.
Schindler's List is about the grimmest of recent historical events, the systematic murder by the Nazis of 6 million Jews. Why did you want to make this film?
Well, that's a hard question because I asked myself that, and I've been asking myself that for a long time. There's not just one really wonderful, easy answer to that. I think it's just a composite of the influence my parents had over me when I was growing up in an Orthodox Jewish house, where my parents were indirectly affected by the Holocaust because my grandparents lost relatives in Eastern Europe. My parents were born in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the USA, and they were very active in telling their children, myself and three of my sisters, stories of the Holocaust ever since I can remember. And they were stories that made me interested as a kid because whenever your parents, your mother and father, talk about murder and they illustrate graphically, I remember one story my parents told me, which I'll never forget, which is about a concert pianist, a Jewish man in his 50s, who in 1936, after a concert, he was on his way home in Berlin, brown shirts attacked him, brought him into the alley, and broke every one of his 10 fingers, to the point that he could never play the piano again. And these were illustrations of something that just seemed incredible as a child to hear from your own parents. But my parents really felt a responsibility to kind of pass it along to us. And I think, in a sense, that sunk in after decades of myself becoming a parent and having children and wanting to pass something along to them. And when I read the book in 1982 by Thomas Keneally, based on the true story of the Schindler-Juden, it was something that occurred to me that I could pass along to my children through what I do best, which is telling stories on film.
Had you wanted to make the subject or to treat the subject before you read the book?
I didn't. I really didn't. I was making E.T. before I read the book, and E.T. came out the week I read the book. E.T. had just gone to theaters in America, and I didn't ever think about, when I was making Jaws or Close Encounters or Raiders of the Lost Ark, I was never thinking about telling a story of the Shoah. It never occurred to me then, no.
But is it right to say that, Keneally's book and your film treat compellingly of a successful attempt to rescue some Jews from slaughter? Is it right to say that that story enabled you to handle subject matter which otherwise might have been impossible to touch?
Well, I think that story of rescue and the tremendous paradox involved in a man who was a German Catholic industrialist and war profiteer, who, and a member of the Nazi Party, who lost everything to save everyone. Yes, that was very compelling. It was an avenue into a subject that's otherwise, too horrendous for words, let alone pictures.
Did you have qualms at any point about the subject matter?
No, I didn't. I think once I became very involved in the research, and I think the thing that really moved me more than anything else was meeting the witnesses, meeting the survivors of the Holocaust. You can read all about it, but until you meet someone in their 70s who comes over to you and shows you the numbers and tells you the stories, it's abstract, to say the least.
How did you prepare yourself for making the movie? By talking to them?
Yeah, by actually meeting Paul Page. His original name was Poldek Pfefferberg, and he was the man, one of the 1,300 Schindler rescued. And he got to know Schindler very, very well after the war. And he became very close to Schindler, and he in fact inspired Thomas Keneally to tell the Schindler story. And I think when I met Paul Page, he was the one to shed the most light on Oscar's life and the life of the Jews who were rescued. And then he said, you know what you must do? You must go to Poland. You must go to Krakow. This will continue to be abstract until you stand on the killing fields. And I went to Krakow and spent time there. And I think more than anything else, that transported me into such an urgency to get the story out.
At one time, you thought of shooting the film at Auschwitz. Is that right? Or
Yes, I did. Well, we shot just literally 50 feet away from the hallowed, sacred, killing grounds of Birkenau, which is that infamous gatehouse that some people might be familiar with.
do you see the movie as entertainment?
I don't see the movie entertainment at all. No.
You shot it in black and white. Why was that?
Well, you have to understand that my only frame of reference, not only to the Holocaust, but the entire Second World War, is black and white, because I was brought up watching black and white documentaries, black and white archival footage, black and white movies about that period, and seeing amazing stills, Bob Kappas, still photographs of the Second World War. I don't have a color frame of reference. My father would always joke with me and said, I fought in World War II. I have a color frame of reference. That war was in color for me. I said, yeah, Dad, but I wasn't alive in World War II. That is alive in black and white. To me, there's more truth in black and white, referencing the Holocaust than there would have been in color.
At 2 points in the movie, 2 remarkable moments, there's a little girl in red. Who is she and why is she in red?
Well, Oskar Schindler noticed her when he was watching the liquidation of the ghetto, and he was on his horse, and he was just taking his morning ride when he saw the pogrom taking place. And when he looked down, he noticed that all the Jews the old were being shot against walls, and the young were being shot, or at least put in lines with their parents and shipped out, some to the left, some to the right. It was the clearing out of the ghetto, the separation of those who could work from those who couldn't. Those who had Ken carts or Blauscheins, work permits, were permitted to go to forced labor camps. Those who had never been issued work permits were either sent away to Treblinka or Auschwitz, where they were put to death immediately. And the only person not being rounded up was this little girl, and she was wearing crimson. And she was the most obvious. And he had the overview of the entire Jewish town, the entire ghetto. And he saw this little dot of red walking through all of this mayhem and organization. And he could not understand why someone so obvious was so forgotten. And I really felt that in the entire movie, that was the only image that needed to be read.
Was it difficult for the crew to work on this movie with its unremitting horror at the center of it?
Everybody. I mean, the crew, the cast, and I think the most amazing thing is even the Poles who we used as extras. I think Polish people who didn't know very much about the Holocaust and didn't know very much about their own country learned so much from what we were telling, and had such an amazing change of just the knowledge that they gained from working on the film. Really showed me that there was not education in Poland. Young kids were not being told about their own country and what their country was used for by the Nazis between 1939 and 1945. And I saw Polish people working with us changed because of what they were learning.
You said a moment ago that you didn't see the film as entertainment, but actually people must feel a want to see it if you're to persuade them to come into the cinema to see it. And it is a story which holds the attention and leaves something on people.
I think entertainment is a very subjective thing. I mean, you could watch an Andy Warhol movie, which is somebody sleeping for 9 hours, and some people could consider that entertainment. Others could consider it, a way to, to go to sleep. And I never looked at the story, the recreation of the Holocaust and the story of Schindler's List to be entertaining. I thought it was going to be informational. I thought that the story was going to give out information and knowledge and facts that would get people, if they responded to this story, to get people to ask more questions about what happened 50 years ago. And I never really entertained the notion that there could be anything entertaining about this particular story. I haven't been anti-entertaining in the making of the film. I've just actually, in a way, the best thing I've done with this movie is I've gotten out of the way of the film. I left all my stuff at home, and I told the story without imposing my own style or whatever I brought to my other pictures. I did my best to stay out of the way of Schindler's List, so it wouldn't be entertaining in the sense my other films have been entertaining.
But it is entertaining in the sense that it tells a story, and that movie and that story, you hope, moves people.
Yeah, I hope a story moves people. Once again, I think it's semantics here about what's entertainment. I hope it moves people to, not to say, well, what can I do about it because this happened 50 years ago. I hope, if anything, gets people to realize that it was one of the reasons I made the movie in 1993, that what's happening in Bosnia today, the word ethnic cleansing, so familial with Final Solution, and just what's really happening in the world today with, neo-fascism, neo-Nazism, just the rise of all that, the toleration. People were again tolerating what they tolerated in 1933, and it's sort of happening again in microcosm. And when this started to happen in 1989, 1990, when communism fell apart and the wall came down and all these things started to rear their ugly heads again, I just seemed a little more compelled to make the movie now than wait another 5 years to make the picture.
In your other movies, in several of them, children feature large. We learn the story through a child's eyes. Why is that? Is that something that helps you particularly as a movie maker?
Well, it's also been my frame of reference. I identify with children. I still am a child. I have a lot of empathy and understanding of what it is like to be a kid, and I think it's been very easy and safe for me to tell most of my stories through the point of view of very wondrous eyes. It's been actually it's been the color ink I use in my pen.
You're 46 years old. You've been twice married. You're a huge success in one of the most popular and industrial mediums of the world of communication. How can you say, I am still a child?
I can without, and I can without shame. I really am. I have 5 children. If anything has caused me, by the way, to grow up, to prepare myself to make Schindler's List, it's been the fact that I now have 5 kids. And that even though I thought my fantasy was that I would I would have a second childhood through my children, when your kids get to be a certain age, they draw the line, and you're on one side and they're on the other. And you are the adult, and you cannot be they don't want a peer, they don't want a friend, they can get that in school. You must be the father, and they must be the child. And they are rigid about that, that sort of, what you call that, the Maginot line. And if anything has really caused me to grow up quickly in the last 4 years, it's been my children.
How can the rest of us preserve that childishness in ourselves?
I don't know. I have sort of I like to call it a kind of, blind optimism about things. Excuse me. I'm always, I'm more hopeful than not, and the glass is half full, not half empty. I've always been that way. I think in a strange, easy soundbite way that that has sort of kept the child, going a bit longer.
The poet told us that the child is father to the man. You sound as if you believe that.
I do believe that.
Did you have a happy childhood?
I didn't think I did growing up. I don't think any of our kids think they're happy until they get to be older and they compare themselves to other children who are not having happy childhoods, and they can look back as an adult and say, yes, I had a happy childhood, or no, I didn't. I think looking back from today, I had a very happy childhood. I don't think I knew that then.
Where was your childhood?
It was around. My father was in computers, until he moved from New Jersey. I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio. My dad got jobs at RCA. So my childhood went from New Jersey to Phoenix, Arizona, to Palo Alto, Northern California, and then back to Los Angeles, California. So my childhood has been around the country.
Who was your father?
My father is he began his life as an electrical engineer after he got out of the Air Force in '45. And my dad was on the team that invented the first data processing computer at RCA. So my dad has always been inventing and involved in computers. The irony now is, because my dad wanted me to follow in his footsteps, and I said never. I was bad at math in school, and my dad was so disappointed I was no good in math. He was a math whiz, and I was terrible at math. Now that my father's in semi-retirement at 75 years old, my father is producing films for Burroughs, a computer company, and these films are sales tools to sell their new line of machinery. And I now have 5 computers in my life, and I know how to program, and I know how to use them, and we've made a strange crossover.
What else did he give you as a scientist in your childhood? Was he showed you the sky, is that right?
My dad offered me the first chance to be curious about the stars by building me a telescope out of a carpet roll, those big cardboard carpet rolls, and he ground the glass himself. He ground a 2-inch a rectangular piece of glass, and he built for me, with some parts from the Scientific Edmund Company, a reflecting telescope when I was about 7, 8 years old.
Was he an absent father or a present father?
He was an absent father, yeah.
Who was your mother? Who is your mother?
My mother is my mother is someone who is 74 years old, who is going on 25. She has the energy of, I guess, Helen Hayes, and when she was in her 70s. Remember Helen Hayes' amazing energy. She is so energetic. She's a concert pianist, and was anyway, and she runs a kosher dairy restaurant in Los Angeles, California right now.
Was there conflict between your parents?
Well, they were divorced. There was always conflict. My mother, with her side of the brain, was always into the arts, and my father, with his side of the brain, was always in the sciences. And there was always sort of a clash of ideologies and culture, and I think, in a sense, my dad was a workaholic, as I am, and my mother, took care of the kids, and there wasn't a lot of communication because he was always working and she was always at home.
Was that separation and that divorce upsetting to you as a child?
I wanted it to happen. I think it was upsetting looking back on it, but at the time my mother was so unhappy, and she was so close to a nervous breakdown, that when my parents were divorced, I felt it had saved my mom's life, that my mom was rescued by the divorce, because she was really going slowly off the deep end. And so I was really in favor of the divorce. I was old enough to hold my mom's hand as a friend of hers. When they actually were divorced, I was 17. It was much harder on my younger sisters, who were all 3 years, 2 years, and 1 year behind me. And it was much tougher on them.
How did you escape from the tensions in your parents' home as a child?
Well, I made movies. I made movies. I just hid behind a camera. It was fun.
Who gave you the camera?
My father. He didn't give it to me. I stole it. I borrowed it.
You watched movies as well as made movies?
Watched television, watched feature films when I could, go to the theater to see them made, little 8mm, imitative productions when I was 12, 13, 14 years old, yeah.
What were the movies you most remember seeing in your childhood that made most impact on you?
Well, the first movie I saw was The Greatest Show on Earth. I was 3 years old in Philadelphia. My dad took me to the theater. I saw that movie, and it made a profound impression on me. Because because they had a big train wreck in The Greatest Show on Earth. 2 trains came together. Actually, not 2 trains. A train and a car hit. The train derailed, and people were hurt and killed. And I got interested in Lionel trains because of that movie. And I remember, because of The Greatest Show on Earth, when my dad got me my first train set, this is years later, I remember that movie, and then I used to use his 8mm Brownie movie camera to film train wrecks, trying to imitate the great train wreck in that film I saw at 3. And I think, in a way, that somehow that sort of perverse, sensational subject matter began to suck me into a hobby which became a profession.
In your teens at home, you made a very long movie, a sci-fi
Yeah.
movie. Did you shot that yourself and cut it yourself?
Yes.
Yeah. When did you first want to direct film as a life?
I think the big seminal moment in my life was when I saw Lawrence of Arabia for the first time. You know, in 70 millimeter. First week it was showing in Phoenix, Arizona. I believe it was at the Palm Theater when it came out. And I was around, I suppose I was around 15 years old, perhaps, when it came out, 14, 15, around there. And that's when I wanted to, after that movie, after that experience, I wanted to make films, not just as a hobby, but I wanted to go into the profession. And I began looking for ways to do that.
Did you ever tell David Lean that?
Of course, yeah.
You made a film called Amblin that was a kind of calling card, and instantly were hired by television. What did you learn directing for television, movies for television?
What did I learn? Expediency, planning, storyboarding. You had to be on time, and they didn't give you the second job. If you did a TV show, you were a half a day over schedule. That was such a war crime that you weren't allowed to do another TV, especially if you were young like I was. And I was kind of breaking into a system that was still populated by the old guard of the old Hollywood. I mean, the average age of my film crews, when I was 21 years old and first starting out in television, the average age of my crews were 62 years old. They had seen all the great movies. They had made the Clark Gable films and the Victor Fleming films and the Michael Curtiz films. They had been there in the heyday of Hollywood, and they were just close to retirement. And I show up at 21 years old with acne to direct Joan Crawford. It was one of those things where I didn't have a lot of friends. There was a big generation gap on those 8 days I shot, and I knew that I had to be on time, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't work again. I was 2 days over schedule on that first thing I did with Joan Crawford on this TV show, and I didn't work for a year. When I got my second job a year later, and I was an old man at 22, and I was given a Marcus Welby with Robert Young to direct, I planned every shot on paper so meticulously that I came in a half a day ahead of schedule, and I consistently worked in television from that day on.
You made a movie called Duel,
Mm.
which was a great success, particularly perhaps in Europe. A movie with very little dialogue. I mean, it's pictures that tell stories in movies, right?
Yes. Pictures tell stories, yes. Words tell stories. You know, too, my emphasis has always been on pictures. And because I wasn't much of a reader when I was growing up, I think I was much more of a picture maker than I was a reader. And now I'm kind of on the side of reading and the side of literature. And I think that David Lean was the filmmaker who proved that great literature, and great visuals can combine, to make Bridge of the River Kwai, Breaking the Sound Barrier. I mean, he really proved that you could merge literature and imagery in one.
You were part of what was thought of as a new generation of movie makers in Hollywood. Somebody called you the movie brats. Were you conscious that you were changing things, that you were part of a new wave, or not?
No, not at the time. I mean, I was conscious of when people began writing about it, and George Lucas and Francis Coppola and myself, and we were all reading about Scorsese, we were all reading about ourselves, that we were part of a wave. At the time, we didn't.
Was it because you were young, you think, that this was said of you all?
Yeah, I think it was because we were kind of, we like the French New Wave, we were an American New Wave. We all came on the scene at the same time, and we were all given feature films basically at the same time, and we all sort of made our own unique products known at the same time. Scorsese, with Mean Streets, and George with American Graffiti, and myself with Sugarland Express. We all sort of came on in the same couple of years.
Was the important thing that you were all part of a generation in whose childhood movies and images on television had meant more than words, do you think?
Yes, yeah.
You were in and out of each other's cutting rooms a bit, looking at rough cuts and advising with De Palma and Martin Scorsese and George Lucas. Was there a camaraderie? Was there a togetherness?
Yeah. We were all friends.
Yeah.
We were all friends. We hung out together. We went to each other's houses together. We complained together. about how the studios were treating us and how they wanted to recut our movies. I was with Marty Scorsese the day that the studio wanted to severely recut the shootout at the end of Taxi Driver, and Marty sort of called us all over to his house on Mulholland Drive in Los Angeles. He was cutting it there, and Marty was beside himself with rage. And then we were enraged, and we were talking about getting on a plane and going to Europe and only making films in Europe. But we've had our moments together, which have been kind of amazing looking back on all the sort of moments we've had. But we still Marty made his movies, Francis Coppola made his. We all made our own movies, but we talked about them all the time.
You had huge success with Jaws pretty early. Did you ever have a point where you thought you might be a failure as a film director?
No, I didn't really. I didn't think so. I've always had a lot of self-confidence as a filmmaker, and I think because I've been shooting little pictures to big pictures since I was 12 years old. When I first got my first assignment when I was 21, as I said before, I felt like I was an old man already. I felt like I was a veteran. I had made 25 little short films before I got my first break. And that gave me so much confidence. I think if I had been given, like today, a lot of young people are given features right away. Immediately, they make one short, or they write a script, and they're allowed to direct it, and they're in the industry like that. And I'm not sure I would have survived if I had gotten a break that fast without having that much experience behind me, albeit 16 millimeter, sort of home shop type movies. It was a great experience for me to do that.
You talked a moment ago about the studios wanting to recut the end of Taxi Driver, and you and those other movie makers saying, let's go to Europe. Do you see a fundamental difference between the demands of the studio movie for a vast audience and the European art house movie?
Well, I think that there is a vast difference. There is a vast difference. The American films are, by and large, with many exceptions, but by and large, they are not personal movies. They are movies that are made with an eye toward, entertaining, large audiences. European films and American films, now we have to talk about Martin Scorsese's pictures, Oliver Stone's pictures. There are other American filmmakers who don't really look at the big picture, nor do they care about the big pictures as much as they care about telling what's in here to whoever will listen. That's always been my admiration and adulation of the European film industry. Is it's always been personal. It's always been, true to heart, and that's been the major difference.
You any idea how many movies you've seen in your life?
I have no idea. I've seen a lot of movies.
Do you watch movies every day?
No, not every day.
Every week?
Every week.
How many is the most you've seen in a day?
Movies in a day? Well, sometimes on a weekend, I used to, what I call, have a movie orgy, where I would see 3 first-run films in one day. I'd catch the morning show, the afternoon show, and the evening show. And I haven't done that in a while, but I'll see probably about 30 films a year if I'm not directing. When I direct, I don't see films because I don't actually want to be influenced by what's out there right now. But when I'm not directing, I see a lot of movies.
I read somewhere that you use video games every day. Is that right? Is that a way of relaxing?
Yeah, it is.
Every day?
It's not really the old-fashioned video games, the stand-up play like this. It's the games on my small home computer that I'll, stick the program in or hit a key and play. And it's a way of relaxing, yeah.
You talked a moment ago about the ability to make a movie that says something that's burning you up inside.
Mm-hmm.
You now have the power to make any movie you want to make, do you not?
Yes.
What's the next? What's burning you up inside? What's the next thing you?
Well, Schindler's List is what was burning me up inside. It's really the first time I've ever burned for a subject. I've had other reasons for making movies, but this is the first time I've really thought that I could put to good use the privileges that have been afforded me over the years, making movies that have allowed me to make, let's say, the telephone book. And I sort of chose the Holocaust as the telephone book, in a sense, and it was something that have been wanting to do for a long time, and this story in particular. And it felt great to be able to use all that, not to entertain per se, but to get it on the public record. And that was a great feeling. I felt so liberated in making Schindler's List, and I'll tell you why. I was liberated because it was in black and white. So already I was making an anti-commercial film. I was making a picture where I was putting so many obstacles ahead of me so it wouldn't be commercial, that it freed my soul to make it the way, with no pressure, that it had to make its money back. And I realized what kind of pressure that puts on filmmakers, especially when you're given big budgets. And the kind of pressure that you've got to have a big opening weekend, you've got to have legs, and you've got to make your negative costs back, and you've got to make your prints and ads back. Then you got to make a profit for the studio, or you're a bum, you know? And by making this relatively low budget, and by doing it in black and white, and choosing this as a subject, it freed me artistically. And I don't ever, in any of the interviews I've ever done before, I never refer to myself as an artist, but I felt for the first time in my life like an artist when I made this movie, because I was working with crude tools, and I didn't have all the fancy Hollywood cranes and things that I've had in my other productions. I didn't have movie stars, and it was, and half the film was handheld, and it felt much more like it was coming from me than it was coming from everything around me.
The bookends of the film, the very front and the very end, are in color.
Mm-hmm.
What is that saying to us?
Well, I guess it's saying in a wit that, in a little bit, that color was peace and freedom, and color was a time when people took time to smell the roses and could see colors. And then when this whole juggernaut rolled out, it just became black and white. It became survival. It became just a an issue of living hour to hour. And I think at the end, it goes back to color again.
The movie is black and white with a little touch of red.
That's it, a little touch of red.
Do you see yourself as an ordinary guy who's thus able to speak to so many millions, or as a sort of outsider in society?
I don't understand the question, because I'm not sure what outsider you mean.
Your films are about people in extraordinary situations. There's a disjunction between them. Something happens in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if that's something in you, if you see if you see a need to be in a situation that you're distant from.
I have this overly active imagination, which, by the way, gives me more hours of not sleeping than sleeping. I have this overly active, thought process, and my mind instantly goes to stories that are removed from the real world. Because I've always wanted to escape, and maybe the divorce, maybe the unhappiness between my mother and father, maybe for a lot of reasons, I've always sought leaving home to go outside our world to tell a story, and to Neverland, or to Indiana Jones country. But in a sense, that is fun for me, because I've always liked to tell stories, and the more distant the stories are from my own life, and I guess the only stupid word I can find is the more fun it is for me to tell those stories. And that's the way it's been for most of my career.
In your films, people face their fears of strangeness and overcome those fears. Have you had to overcome fears in your personal life?
Sure I have, absolutely. All of us do. I have many fears in my personal life, and I make movies about them sometimes.
After so much colossal success, what motivates you to go on to make the next one?
Oh, I know. Just because I love it so much. I just really love it. And it's just, I can't get out of my system. I just adore it. I don't know why. I'm afraid if I really discuss it and analyze it and figure out why I love it so much, it'll evaporate. It'll say, you look the gift horse in the mouth. We'll see you. We're going on to the next filmmaker. So I don't ever want to embrace the why, to look at it too closely under a microscope. It just is there. It's not gone away yet.
So has Schindler's List released a Jewishness in you that you've been quiet about?
The movie communicates the Jewishness in me, but my evolution to a kind of, pride in being a Jew really happened with the birth of my kids and the decision I made to raise them Jewish. And I got reacquainted and reassimilated into Judaism through having children. And I think all that conspired to get me to make Schindler's List. Now, Schindler's List is the product of a number of years of recognizing and regaining my pride in being a Jew that I didn't have as a young person, because my parents were always raising us in Gentile neighborhoods, and I was the only Jew in the neighborhood, the only Jew in the elementary school, and I had problems. I was different in that way.
Critics have called some of your movies sentimental. Are you sentimental?
I am. I don't know who I get that from. I think my mother, but I am.
You said you had fears. What is it that you fear?
Well, it's a laundry list of fears. My goodness. I sort of always have feared being alone. I think the biggest fear I have is loneliness. And movies, children, I fill my life up to the brim, because one of my principal fears has always been sort of being alone in the world.
Have you ambitions yet to fulfill?
You mean outside of making movies? Yes, seeing my kids through college, finding them good schools, and taking them a little closer. And I'm not criticizing my parents. I am criticizing my parents, actually. But I would like to be more involved in my children's life. Even though I like my father, work as hard as my father worked, I'd like to, and I am in practice closer to my kids, I think, than my father was to me, and that's an ambition.
If you direct an absolutely major movie, that's sort of 8 or 9 months of your life totally devoted to it. Can you do that and still be close to your family?
You certainly can. You have to get your family to agree to go on location with you, as they agreed to come to Poland with me. I had my entire family for 4 months in Krakow with me. But I would never go off and leave my family for a film. If my family, because of school, had to stay in Los Angeles, and it gets harder for me to leave when they get older, and it becomes more. You can take a first grader out of school for 4 months. You can't take a fourth grader out of school for 4 months. It will limit my travels. And I've already made that choice in my own heart, that I will stay with my family and make films closer to home as they get older.
If you had to choose one sequence from your movies to show your children, or one day your grandchildren, as to what you are about as a movie maker,
that's a tough question.
what would you like them to see most?
Oh my goodness. Well, I got to think about that. I mean, that's what comes to mind right away. That's hard. So many images are running through my head right now. Nothing is just nothing. No one image is jumping out at me.
When you make movies, do you want to know what other people think of them, or don't you mind very much what other people think of them?
I care desperately what other people think of them, and because I care so much, I sometimes hold my ears and close my eyes when it comes time to hear what other people think of them. That's another one of my fears. The fear of approval and the fear of disapproval. And so sometimes, when I don't read reviews and things like that, it's just being afraid to find out. And I'll hide for months sometimes, not knowing what people thought of my movie. And then it will slowly start to assimilate whether it was received well or not received well, whether my friends liked it or they didn't like it. It always comes out in the laundry after about 4 months. But sometimes I'll look right away like this, and other times I'll hold back and not look for a while.
When I asked you about ambition, you gave ambitions in terms of your family. Would you like to win an Oscar as a director?
Someday. I mean, no filmmaker, would ever. I don't think, unless they were political in some way. I don't think any filmmaker would deny that to themselves in their lives. But it's never been my principal, goal or motivation. But around that time, it's as suspenseful as anything else to everybody, I think.
How would you like to be remembered?
Oh, I don't know. I have a tough time writing my own epitaph. It's been tough for me to. I've rarely, a couple of times been asked that question, and I've never had a good answer for it. I don't know. In a way, it's too early in my work for me to start thinking about how I want to be remembered.